Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Thursday, July 31st, 2025, episode 452, and we're going to talk about the isolationism of Trump. But before we do, just want to make a quick note, an observation, if you will. So the news for the last couple of days was going crazy about the earthquake that happened in Kamchatka, I believe, in Russia, and therefore how basically the whole world was going to be swallowed up by a tsunami coming from that earthquake. Now, I Googled some pictures and it looked like there was a lot of damage, but it might have been more that it was not as populated a place in Russia, not surprising. But people basically evacuated, did all these um, emergency precautions to protect themselves against the tsunami. What I thought was interesting was in the back of my head, I was thinking, well, don't they have like buoys in the middle of the ocean somewhere that can track the height of the waves that are caused by the earthquake? That was in the back of my head because I remember when there was a tsunami in Japan. Yeah, as a matter of fact, when it hit the nuclear reactor over there in Japan. um I'm blanking on the name. Fukushima or something like that. And I guess for some people that is in the back of their minds, and so they don't want another ca catastrophic tsunami, uh, similar to that one, and so they wanted to evacuate a lot of people. I don't know other places of the world, but as far as the West Coast here in the United States, it seems like it was not really a big deal. So I thought it was very interesting, right? That it reminded me of the flash flooding in Texas because it was a government-controlled alarm system. They erred on the side of caution so that people were getting flash flood warnings pretty frequently to the point where people started to ignore them. And so I wonder if this is not a similar setup where you're going to essentially cry wolf, tell everyone there's going to be a major tsunami, and then turn out to be not a big deal, at least here in the United States. And so then the next time it happens, people will say, it'll probably be nothing. And then you'll see a lot of damage. I don't know. That was something that just played out in my head. I thought I would just say it for the record. I did talk about isolationism once back in episode 37, which was way back when. And Usually people will call you an isolationist. And I said this in that episode as well, that people will call you an isolationist as a response to saying that you are pro-peace. And we have to understand that war is not pro-peace. I don't know why it has to be said, but it has to be said, right? Because when you say that you're pro-peace, then they call you isolationist, right? But then the opposite of isolationist would be to participate in the war. And war is not pro-peace, right? It's not also anti-isolationist, all right? But that's the way that people use these words, and that's the impression they want to, kind of create, that being anti-isolationist, going and killing lots of people leads you to peace, right? So you can't have freedom. Freedom isn't free, that kind of thing. Um, and it's interesting. I should probably do an episode on freedom isn't free, but anyway. So what is it to isolate? Isolate is to be alone, to be a loner, perhaps. Now, if you're a person and you are a loner or you like to self-isolate, well, it's a choice. And these days, it's a lot easier to do that than before, right? You can just order things online, have things dropped off at your front door. You never really have to go out if you have no desire, right? If you want more friends, then you'd have to make adjustments, right? You'd have to do what the rest of us does, figure out how to talk to other people pleasantly or in a way that will get people interested in what you're trying to say. And then you have friends, or you can get filthy rich and you can buy your friends, whatever kinds of friends that you like. But as a nation, interestingly, it's kind of similar, right? Government of your country has to know how to get along with the governments of other countries. Or you can create such a prosperous country that other countries want to get close with you. So as a national policy, if you act like a bully and you're making demands in exchange for nothing, well, then, and the whole time you're talking about justice and equity, being fair, and also claiming that you're being cheated by all of the other governments of all the other countries. Well, now we begin to see uh, a sort of an isolationist policy. In other words, the way that Trump is acting these days is not fostering sort of goodwill, sort of good vibes. It's not anti-isolationist. In other words, Trump is not trying to be global in his outlook, get along with everybody, which it was what it seemed like he wanted in the beginning of his term. And then now he's pretty much a bully, which leads to isolationism. In other words, the bullying that Trump is projecting, which, honestly, I gotta say, Trump is just more open about American bullying, right? The past, what, 4 or 5 presidents have pretty much bullied other countries, including Obama, right? So, after a while, the countries that are being bullied, they want to estrange you. They want to get away from you, right? And because of the bullying policies of the United States, it pushes other countries away and make them start talking to each other. And I've mentioned this before, but because of all of the bullying that is the foreign policy of the United States, it pushed Russia and China together, right? And so I was surprised because they share like a huge border with each other and they never got along. But now they do, right? So now they started talking, they were smiles, handshaking, when Xi Jinping met with Putin. They were saying, this is historic. This will be incredible. This happened like a year ago. And so incredible things are happening in other parts of the world, primarily because of the foreign policy of this country. And keeping in mind, of course, that this ball started to roll faster with the Biden administration because he was just like totally, he was just off the rails, just as much as Trump is. So now you see a lot of these countries getting together and forming the BRICS nations, where many other countries are falling over themselves to try to join. And even best of all is that Russia and China are opening it up to pretty much everybody. Anyone can participate. They're facilitating, making it easier for people to participate in the BRICS system. I'm going to use that expression, BRICS system. It's not so simple. It's kind of complex. There are a lot of moving parts, but I'm just going to generally categorize it as the BRICS system. And the reason is because they're not getting any traction from the United States. The United States, it's our way or the highway, right? I'm going to make all these demands. You're not going to get anything in return. You should thank us for doing business with us, right? You should thank us for giving us all your manufactured goods in exchange for paper, right? Dollars. It's just weird, right? It's odd that so many people just can't see where this is going. And so it's not that the United States is by its own policy. They're not pursuing an isolationist policy. At least that's not what they say. But I would say that's what they're doing. They're pursuing an isolationist policy by basically getting all of the other countries in the world, except it's like, what do you call it? The countries that are dependent completely on the United States, like NATO countries. All the other countries basically want to isolate themselves from the United States. In other words, they are going to isolate the United States, but that's a result of U.S. Foreign policy. And as a citizen of this country, you got no choice but to watch all of this happen and then have other people who you thought were smart basically say that you are a tinfoil hatter, you're an idiot, you're what is it? What's that? QAnon. I don't even know what QAnon is. I'm not even curious enough to look it up either. Um, but America was able to pull this off for a while because they had the dollar, which was the reserve currency of the world, and they had a military, right? So they were able to back up a lot of its demands with its, double threat, as it were, the dollar and the military. So a lot of countries, other governments had to get along with the United States, but that time is over. I've talked about it before. The US is militarily weak, it's politically weak, and they've abused the dollar, right? I compare it with the Catholic Church around the 16th century when you had the Protestant Reformation, right? So for basically, call it 13 centuries, the Catholic Church was a formidable power in Europe. And then when it started to decline, Protestants in the furthest parts of furthest away from Rome were able to break away. Hence the Protestant Reformation. Um, I saw a clip of My Bodyguard, which is a movie from 1980, had Adam Baldwin in it. Maybe you saw it. But basically, if you get bullied all the time and you don't want to take it, then you come up with a plan on how to beat the bully. Just like the missile strategy that I've talked about before, that Iran put into action against Israel, right? So Israel invested in those high-tech, expensive missiles produced by the United States, and Iran was like, okay, we'll just use all these cheap drones, and then what we'll do is we'll deplete, force Israel to shoot off all of its expensive rockets, Patriot missiles, pulling down our cheap drones. And once they've exhausted all their ammunition, then we start shooting them with the good stuff. And that basically has happened. That's a plan I would have come up with. Anyone who played strategy games, computer games, you see what they did, right? So you know that this is what they've got. They're not developing anything new. So all you have to do is defeat that strategy. That's it. And that's what everyone else is doing financially now, right? So a lot of countries are taking advantage of BRICS because it really is that answer to US. People have been using the word hegemony, US dominance all over the world. So basically, many of the other countries, not the United States, has been playing the long game. And the US and NATO countries have been playing the short game, right? So we're not talking about 3D chess or 4D chess. It's about time horizon, right? You know that you have to be patient because this kind of government, the government that the United States has, cannot go forever. And what is it? I forget who I was listening to. They were talking about how people are just going to, yes. It was, I believe it was a conversation with Peter Grandich and Vince Lancy. I forget the podcast title, but they were having a conversation. And basically they said what we already knew, right? Putin said this in his at some point where he said, you can have, he's been through several presidents now, right? And every one of them have ideas, but once they get into office, people with dark suits and suitcases show up and they tell the new president how it is, right? This is what's going to happen. And so the rest of the world, Trump is going on and on about his tariffs and this and that. No one cares anymore. They know they just have to wait for the midterm elections, and he's gone, right? He's done. There's nothing that he can do. There's no leverage. There's nothing. There are no cards that he has that he can play to make people come to the table or to arrive at any kind of, negotiation for a deal that will benefit the United States while penalizing all of the other countries. And essentially, that's Trump's deal. The art of the deal is to screw over the person you're dealing with while gaining an advantage, right? It's bullying. And so this hypocrisy of the United States and of Donald Trump, of our government, is unfortunately bearing fruit, right? So if you're going to be a bully, you have to have something to back it up. And the United States no longer has anything to back up its bullying. No one wants the dollar anymore, and the US military is on life support, right? Gave away all the weapons, all the missiles. US military strategy failed in Syria, well, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Israel, arguably, Ukraine, right? All the weapon systems, the strategies, none of that worked. And so, militarily speaking, they're weak. The strategy and the kind of war they were preparing for will never be fought. And even now, if you look at any of the videos that you can see on X about the war in the Ukraine, you'll see that the complexion of war has dramatically changed. And I don't think the United States, the vast majority of the United States, is ready for it. And so all of this bullying that Trump is engaging in, yeah, it's falling on deaf ears. If I could figure it out, then definitely all these other people, especially like a former agent of the KGB, I mean, they totally know. Bullying is hypocrisy. And I just want to state again for the record, uh, Trump has to be suffering from some sort of mental decline. He has to be. There's no way that the guy who was stumping for president last summer is the same guy. There's just no way. I don't believe it, right? And I said also that it might be because they're holding his family, under threat, but it's a different person, right? He's either he's suffering something, but his attention span, his just the things that he's saying is just so ridiculous. Um, anyway, so bullying is hypocrisy, right? Uh, think about it. Trump is threatening China. Biden threatened China, but with what, right? They provide the materials necessary for US military equipment, the rare earths that pretty much the US gets all of it from China. Uh, is which is necessary for US missiles, right? They'll run out. If they go to war with China, then what do you use as weaponry if China is the country that is supplying you with all of the rare earth materials you need for your missiles and jets and whatever? It's a serious problem. And it makes no sense. And why would you threaten? Why would you try to bully a country that has all of the cards and you have none? It's just so weird. Like the one card that Trump could have played, which he sort of burned up or tore up and burned, was peace, right? Bringing an end to hostilities in Ukraine, no longer supplying Israel, stopping all these, closing down all these military bases, right? We're at the point where Russia was in 1990, 91. But nope, nope, doubling down because people in power just cannot give up that power. ICE is revealing hypocrisy of both supporters and enemies of Trump, right? People are either outraged by it or not, but they're totally fine with press gangs in Ukraine and Child Protective Services here in America, which separates children from their families. So there's a lot of hypocrisy, right? And you try to show this to people and they just don't get it. I think it was a conversation that Michael Malice was having with Tom Woods. And they basically said most people, 90% of people cannot reason. They cannot think things through. They have to wait for instructions to figure out their next move. And so that's why I'm doing this podcast to try to reason to the 10% and try to figure out a way to have conversations with other people in the 90%. This also takes me to this, I know we're at the 20-minute mark. I'll finish up real fast. The great man theory. Okay. So, and it's not sexist. Okay. That's what it's called, the great man theory. And I'll read from Wikipedia. The great man theory is an approach to the study of history popularized in the 19th century, according to which history can largely be explained by the impact of great men or heroes, highly influential and unique individuals who, due to their natural attributes such as superior intellect, heroic courage, extraordinary leadership abilities, or divine inspiration, have a decisive historical effect, right? And so basically it's from a guy named Thomas Carlyle, who also criticized economics, which I think is funny. Anyway, but and he gave lectures on heroism in 1840, right? So 19th century, 1840, and later wrote a book called On Heroes, Hero Worship, and the Heroic in History. Right. So basically, you're saying that it's because of these awesome personalities that history is what it is. And it's contrasted with a people's history, which focuses on the life of the masses, right? Creating overwhelming waves of smaller events, which carry leaders along with them. Another contrasting school is the historical materialism. Historical materialism is a Karl Marx theory of history, and you get into class struggle and all that kind of stuff. So basically, you see this action reaction thing about the great man. Oh, we need a great man like Trump to lead us into the promised land. You know, some goofy thing like this, right? And I always make fun of the great man theory. Why do we even know these people exist? Because of historians. Why are historians promoting and writing about them in the way that they are? Because they like their ideas. The historian likes the outcome, likes that person, and likes the things that came out of his mouth. That's it, right? Otherwise, no one really cares, right? Why should I care that this person was president when the war ended? Why should I care that this person was president when we went into war? You know, so this is the guy that signed the piece of paper that led to the construction of a dam, of a building project. Did that president build that building? Well, no. Well, then, so what's so great about it, right? The building would have gone up whether the president was there or not, right? So it's a very interesting, weird situation where we're going to talk about a great man who's, or woman, it can be a woman, a great human being, right? Because they're superior intellect, okay? So that we have less freedom, right? So historians and academicians, they'll highlight the personalities that they like because they want more of what was the result of this person's actions, meddling, interference with our freedom. So the more that we highlight a great person and seek or desire another one like him or better, more for our context and situation, the less freedom we have, right? And so it's taken a while for people to see the effects of so-called isolationism and the lack of concern for hypocrisy. And so basically, we have to, this is me saying we got to get back to freedom and a justice-centered society. And the more we do that, no one would ever think about a great man or woman. Like, I need a great man in my life. No, we just need more freedom and justice. All right, so this is a roundabout way talking about isolationism and why we have it and what would be the response, what would be the solution for this mess. Freedom and justice. Talk to you next time.